I hope you had a great start to the year. I'm going to jump straight into the comparison between the Canon R6 and the Nikon Z6 II. Now, this is not going to be a typical review, the ones that you see where people compare what's there in the two cameras, compare specs. What I'm going to talk about overall is the ethics, the attitude, and the temperament of a company, of a brand, and how those things are backed up, or how those things are reflected in some of the things that are there in these cameras in the system or not there in the cameras in the system. How it all comes down to usability, how it comes down to how you're actually getting treated by these companies. And for me, that is more valuable, that is more important as a decision making criteria than some specs you happen to have in one body, especially if you're here for the long haul, especially if you're getting yourself invested in these systems. That's something you should I think, watch out for than to just look at one body and buy them, because you're buying the body is just the beginning. I'm going to speak to you about things, the problems you're likely to face in each of these cameras. I'm going to start with Canon because the list is pretty long, and it's also the reason why I haven't gotten the R6. I was very interested in getting the R6, but there's so many things, so many tiny little niggles that stopped me on my track. I thought, okay, I think I should just watch out and not get in the system. I think I want to start with a very interesting fix that Canon has actually done with the R6. When the camera first came out, if you had set the AF to the back button, after you set the back button focus, if you had done that on the R6, you would have faced a very strange problem. The camera's intervalometer would have stopped working for you. And a lot of people face that. Some people face that problem. And when Canon slipped in a new firmware update, they didn't mention that there's a problem like that. They simply rectified it surreptitiously. Why so? Why be so sneaky and so creepy about it? It's the guilty minds that do it. You might think that I'm starting the video with a bit of negativity on Canon, but you will see why. If you watch Taylor Jackson's video where he talks about why he has actually moved to, he was using Canon R6 and he was quite happy, but after some point in time, the moment Z6 II came out, he was more than happy to grab one and just start shooting with that. Why? The reason was that for him, the Canon R6 was not a proper hybrid camera, because it's not a simple task to move from shooting pictures to shooting video and coming back to video again. Settings change, and if you move from photo shooting to video shooting, you get into full automatic. You have no control over shutter speed, aperture, ISO. The camera is doing everything completely on its own, so you lose that control. And in any professional setup, you want to be able to control what the camera is doing. So it's definitely not a professional hybrid video shooting camera. It's not. By now it's a redundant point to even speak about, but overheating. If you have to stop your camera after 30 minutes, give it time for it to cool down, and then after it is cooled down, you can't use the full 30 minutes. And if you have to plan so much, you plan your life so much around the idiosyncrasies of the camera, I don't think it is doing its job. It should just come out and work. It's not a cheap camera. $2,600 cameras are not cheap. Maybe it's cheap for a lot of rich people. Most people are not rich. So if I ask you for $2,600, will you be able to give it to me like that? No, right? You will demand some service out of me, and the service has to be of some quality, and therefore the camera has to give you consistency and reliability, and that's where Canon overall fails. I'll paint that picture with many more points. It's not like I'm deliberately painting that picture. That's what it is. The auto ISO sucks. Basically, when you have when you kept the camera in auto ISO and you're shooting a video, and you're moving from a dark space to a more well-lit place, and again into a darker space, the auto ISO practically doesn't work, and in the process the scene gets too dark. It keeps focusing backward where it finds a bit of light, and what happens is also actually after a point, of course, because there's not much light, the camera is not seeing much, it loses track of the face and the eye. Of course, the moment there's a bit more life and the light, the camera grabs focus of the eye and the face immediately. But you have set it to auto ISO for a reason, because you want the exposure to be automatically go up and down according to the situation. If it doesn't do that, then it's auto ISO that doesn't work. It's such a basic thing. Again, this camera is so loaded, the R6 is so loaded, and eye performance, it's loaded with video specs, and the eye autofocus and the autofocus performance are the two major things in this camera that people are raving about. However, when you want to use the full power of the video, for example, when you want to use C-Log, the eye autofocus and face detection performance drops, and that tells you that the system is not ironed out. It's not performing properly. It's not performing to what it's not, and that tells you that it's not reliable. But not only that, the bigger issue is not only does it lose track of your face, it's very difficult to get it back. To get Not only does it lose track of your face, it's also very hard to get it back to focus in your face again immediately. So you have to again just tinker with the camera and fix it. The 102 frames per second video quality in HD is low. The quality is low, and you have only heard high frame rates to be low in Fuji X-T4 when it records at 240. Otherwise, in other cameras at this price point give you soft results at 120 FPS, which is a bummer. We all know about the lack of all-eye codec. It has got IPB, which is very compressed, very hard to use, and you might just need to upgrade your computer for that. Now, I talked about overheating, but the overheating really gets exaggerated when you're using 4K. So for all the noise that the camera has made, it's practically an HD camera, full HD camera. It's a great full HD camera, but it's not even a proper 4K camera if it overheats so frequently. Because of the lack of proper codec, because of the overheating, if you are a serious video shooter, you will have to use an external recorder, and that external recorder is $600 more. In fact, the price can shoot up very quickly depending on your storage requirement. So if we have to get an external recording, which takes us to the next point, you need a proper HDMI port, and it's got a micro HDMI port, which is most people end up breaking them, and it's not convenient. Now I'll talk about a few points on photography. Before I start talking about performance, the first thing that I'd like to comment on is the material of the body. It's got a magnesium alloy chassis, but the body, the outside of it is built with plastic. It's carbon fiber, whatever it is. It's basically plastic, and that has helped it reduce weight. But most of the pro level cameras, whether it's Panasonic or Sony or Nikon, they're made with alloys. The full bodies are made with alloys, especially at this price point. So it is very disappointing to see a mainstream front running, a market leader camera brand setting the wrong example for the rest of the market. And that's the biggest problem that I have, that it's setting the wrong example. You have to have better material used for the body. The 20 megapixel sensor, interestingly, does not support full 4K resolution in cropped mode. If you're shooting video in cropped mode, it does not support full 4K resolution, which is the quality of a camera system is best judged, according to me. The quality of a camera system is best judged, according to me, by the quality of its most affordable Nifty 50. The RF 50mm 1.8 lens is not as sharp as the Nikons. They're not as sharp as the Sony. And the RF 50mm lens 1.8 has got a lot of chromatic aberrations as well. It's simply does not match to the standards set by Nikon and Sony or Panasonic or even Fuji for that matter, for mirrorless bodies, mirrorless brands now. So that's really disappointing because they're not coming in cheap. Of course, it's cheaper, but you know what it tells you? They don't have a professional 50 mm at 1.8. You'll have to buy an expensive lens, and the next lens you buy, which is 50 mm, is 1.2, which is going to be which is more than $2,000 again. So you understand the trap, the way you are trapped. You want to be happy with the cheap nifty 50. You're not going to get a get very good image quality out of it. It'll work, but it's not the best that Canon can offer you. It I'm sure Canon can, but it does not. It refuses to offer you that quality for a nifty 50. So for quality, you'll have to upgrade yourself to a 1.2 lens, which is more than 5 times the cost, and it's chunky and heavy. The IBIS is only can be set on the body and not on the lens, which is a problem that you see on the Nikon bodies as well. For example, the 7200 Nikon Z lens does not have uh, IBIS switch, I mean lens stabilization switch on the body of the lens, so you can only control it from the camera, which is a common problem. I guess that's a new standard being set by the mirrorless bodies now. You only have 20 megapixels, and a lot of people will defend and say, you know what, I took a picture with my 2 megapixel camera 20 years back. Why are you comparing 20 years back with now? There's no point. You don't compare the 20 years autofocus of 20 years back. So why are you comparing megapixel? Because the thing is that today situations and standards have changed. And secondly, if you're someone who's creative and you want to be able to crop your pictures, you have no croppability left with 20 megapixels. Understand that. You have no megapixels to sacrifice and get creative and probably get a very tight crop if you need to ever. And I'm sure every photographer knows that they need to at times crop. So 20 megapixels, no, it's not enough, especially if you have one camera. Now the new Z6 II has a very interesting thing. The moment you flip out the screen, the EVF sensor stops working. So even if your hand comes in front of the EVF, the LC does not turn black. That's a great feature. That's a very smart thing to do. It just tells you that the brand is remembering usability, real life usage of the consumer. The Canon, it has got a tilt screen, but every time you use your wavy hand around the EVF trying to do something, set a few buttons right, the LCD turns off. So I mean that's very unsmart. The burst shoot rate lowers. The burst shoot rate lowers when you're shooting at with a battery that is charged below 60%. It's a strange thing. Your battery, you'll have to, how many batteries will you carry to ensure that all your batteries are above 60%? It's very impractical. Canon R6 files cannot match Nikon or Sony in dynamic range. Not even today. That's a fact. Whether it's video or in stills, it just can't. It comes very close, but it's still beaten by both those brands. Most of the lenses in the Canon lineup has focus breathing. You can check out those lenses individually. I'm not going to tell you which ones, but most of them have focus breathing, which is very interesting because very few of the Nikon lenses have focus breathing. The Nikon lenses simply don't have focus breathing. So they're just right for video. I touched upon it. Now I touched upon this next point a little bit earlier when I talked about the 50 mm RF lens 1.8. The fact is that the entire lineup of 1.8 lenses that you see on the Nikon are professional grade. They are fantastic lenses. So you don't need to buy a 1.4 lens and stop done at 1.8 to get sharpness and very high image quality at wide open 1.8, whether they talk about 35mm, 50mm, 85mm, all of 20mm, 24mm, all of those lenses are extremely high quality lenses at 1.8. Canon simply cannot match that. Simply can't. This camera can apparently shoot at 20 FPS in silent shooting, but check Gordon Lang's video, you'll see how the IBIS generates so much wobble in every frame when you're shooting with a silent feature, with a silent shutter. And I don't know how you fix wobble in post. I mean, are you willing to take chances for that? So for me, as long as there is any bit of wobble, the 20, so for me, as long as there is any wobble in any of the pictures, it simply is not acceptable. You can't have wobbles in the pictures of a apparently professional camera, which is worth $2,600, supposed to be state of the art. Since it have a lot of arguments on this not having rolling shutter or this not having any wobble, it has a tiny bit of rolling shutter. Research well, you'll find out. I'll put a few links down there, you'll understand. It has a little bit of a rolling shutter which affects the pictures taken at in the silent mode, and it has the IBIS adds more wobble into the pictures. They just get distorted, which is not cool at all. Now if you watch Hugh Brownstone from Three Blind Men, one of my favorite reviewers, and he says how the Canon system is overall unreliable. Overall, it seems as if they're trying to market themselves well, pitch a nice story, but overall what they're offering you is not something that is perfected. And you can see the moment these cameras came out, there's so many problems. You need to fix things. I remember one of those reviews on Nikon Z6 II, and that person said, oh, how can we launch an incomplete camera in the form of Z6 II when the 4K is not yet sort of sorted? You'll have to push it through a firmware update. Well, the thing is, it did not give you a 4K 60p that does not work. Nikon said, I'll give you a 4K 60p when it's ready, but whatever the camera packs right now, it works. I cannot say the same thing about the Nikon for the Canon R6. There are so many problems, there are so many inconsistencies that it is shocking that so many people are actually celebrating these cameras. You're not buying breakthrough advancements in technology. You're buying a product that is reliable and that you can live with for the next 5 to 6 years. If you have a great prototype, it's great for the company. Don't sell it. It's a prototype. You have to sell a model that works. Things have to work, and if they're not perfected, they're not suitable for the market. I think this matter comes down to ethics, and therefore I changed my decision to buy the Canon because I was very interested to buy a Canon because some of the lenses, I wanted to use some of the lenses. In fact, some of the older EF lenses was very interesting to me, and I was looking forward to that. But after looking at all this, what I felt essentially is that this is a brand that traps you in with some promise, and then every step of the way there is a problem that you face, and you will be, people are carrying ice packs with them to cool the camera down. How ridiculous is that? So, do you realize how many points I mentioned while talking about the Canon R6? The fuck ups of Canon R6? No less than 24 issues. 24. Find 10 in the Z6 II. You won't be able to find 5. And that's the difference. So what about the Z6 II? What's wrong with the Z6 II? For me, there is one issue with the Z6 II. It should have packed a little bit more. But I think for the price they've come at, you really can't complain much. The fact they're going to push a 4K 60 feature into the camera, that is very interesting. I wish it had at least 10-bit 420 for full HD, even if it didn't have for 4K, and because it's got fast cards, it's CF Express compatible. Nikon should have tried to and it's got 2 processors. They should have looked at the possibility of including that feature in the camera, and that's a bit of that is a sort of you can say I was disappointed by it. But for the rest of the camera, it just simply does everything well, and the autofocus has improved a lot, and I know for a fact that there's going to be a lot of improvements. The good thing about the Nikon Z6 II is that I switched between Z and Z. So see, the good thing about the Nikon Z6 II is that their focus right now is not fixing the camera. The focus is on improving the camera. So whatever firmware you'll see in future is going to be about how to make the camera better, make it go faster, run further, not about how to fix the fuck ups done in the past. So I think they have offered us a pretty well-rounded and a finished, reliable product. The weather sealing has improved, the grip has improved. I think overall, ergonomically, it's a really well-rounded camera. So I think overall, when I'm looking at the camera, I'm buying into the intent. I'm looking at how reliable these cameras are. I don't want to buy a plastic body at all with that amount of money. Not at all. I do not want to buy a camera that is not fully hybrid, that can't flip into a video or photo mode within a second, or in fact split of a second. You know, when you flip your the Z bodies, from if you're shooting a recording a video and just change the mode from video to photo, it saves the video and then moves. You don't even have to finish the recording, and that's how intuitive the cameras are from the Z system, which is really fantastic. And people terribly underappreciate these cameras, like Hugh Brownstone talks about in his videos, in the last couple of videos. So I hope you have your answer, you know, and I hope it's the right kind of Z6 II versus Canon R6, because if you need to find out problems with what's offered in the Z6 II, you can write it down below. I haven't found one. If you can find one, we can have a debate later on. Thank you. See you again.